Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Pulse podcast where we ask pulse raising questions about all things Christian related. My name is Raphael and I'm part of our God Given Missions social media team. And today I'm joined by the lovely MT Omini. Today's topic or the question we're asking is the church structure of today wrong? Is there a specific way that church is supposed to be, or is church supposed to follow this CEO kind of structural leadership where there's one person at the top and it filters down like a pyramid? Or what is church structure supposed to be like biblically?
Well, it's a good question because it's very important to consider this thing. I wish I could say there was a church structure today, but there's so many different types of churches and denominations, and it would be unfair to kind of say the world does church this way and this is the way it ought to be, because I don't even know how the world does church and on my church, but that's pretty much it. I can speak to the CEO culture. There's a lot of bleeding happening between the world and the church at large, in that, we see like successful tech companies and we see successful, finance companies, whatever it is. And I think sometimes we kind of go, well, in the name of pragmatism, clearly the kind of CEO, guy wearing no shoes, doesn't cut his hair, like Zen type leader, goes to the gym a bit, so like he's quite hench as well. Like that kind of way of doing church leadership works, and so we kind of borrow from that and bring into the church. But the difficulty is, the church isn't unlike any other organization. When the church was first introduced, in the book of Acts, when we kind of see the church being formed, it is literally a project like no other. We had synagogues, we've had religious groups in the past, but the church is this organization. In fact, it was more of an organism, right? And it just couldn't be killed. The head is Jesus, and he died, so he wasn't there. But somehow the Spirit was busy just bringing people together, and it's just like this revolutionary organization. Nothing like it has ever existed. It is the body of Christ. In fact, Christ is coming back for the church, right? So it's just like, this is not some little thing or something that you can compare with how China is run. It's not. It's a totally different beast, so to speak. And so, because it's so interesting and it's also not our idea, I think we are wise when we realize how little we know about this, and we try as hard as we can to stick to biblical principles as per how churches should look. I think we're in danger when we start to infuse our own pragmatic sense of how things ought to work. Some people think some structures are more expedient, so they just get it done. Some people think the traditional church model, by the way, you got books like Titus, books like Acts, books like 1 Corinthians, 1 Timothy that speak about leadership in the church and how church ought to look. And some people just think, these portions of scriptures are just too complicated. Having this kind of first amongst equalness of a pastor is long. So let's just have a pastor who has a divine channel to God and can say anything, and we just have to kind of listen to him, because that's just much easier, right? But the New Testament doesn't talk about that. The New Testament really mentions two positions when it comes to church leadership. That is of deacons and elders. And sometimes we use those terms interchangeably, but also sometimes we use terms like pastor and overseers, so to speak. And that's pretty much it. The word elder sometimes is translated as presbyter, right? Or shepherd, and we know kind of what that means. And overseer sometimes is translated as bishop. And the idea is essentially that these two classes, or these two roles, are occupied by several godly men within each church. And there's lots of verses that kind of illustrate how the terms overlap and what they should do. Those epistles I've told you about. That is pretty much the only definition we get of how church is exactly meant to look at it from a leadership perspective. It's not the CEO, I can do whatever I want kind of model. It is godly men who use leadership scriptures as a conceptual beacon, namely the kind of, the church is very adamant about the type of people they should be, the type of life they should be living. And so we have them basically serving the church, and once we have them, then you have congregants, you have kind of members of the church who are also active within church life. It's not a speaker and an audience. No, it's bishop and elders and congregants. These are members of a church who serve in various capacities, right? So we know in the early church we had common trust, people putting money together to meet other people's needs. People would put their skills in. It was very much a participatory kind of environment. It wasn't I'm coming to church to listen to an inspirational talk. No, it was, I'm very much involved in the church life. There's a need over there. Okay, let's put money there. Okay, I want to volunteer to help this person. Or you need help with there was a shared life that's kind of particular with churches. And my fear is as churches become and start to look more like organizations, we miss out on this kind of organism-like way of living where church is living, it's breathing, there's so much pumping through it. That's what we need in church. And the Bible seems to suggest that that's the best way to do church. That's when you get the best out of what church is, when people are serving each other. And leaders literally are seen as people who just serve more. They're not special in that, they choose. What's special about them is the fact that they're serving, and not that they have this divine this or divine that. No, they're serving, as it were.
So if I'm not mistaken, when we look at the early church and the rise of the early church, they were formed of like quite small communities, like not tens and thousands of people, but just like communities, really small communities. If we are to follow that model or to go in that way, does that mean we should essentially be against the idea of like mega churches today and stuff like that? Should we crave our churches to have the most people? I know that's a prayer point that I've heard a lot of churches pray, that we want to see our walls expand, and we want thousands of people to come to our church. Is that something we shouldn't be praying for? Should we try and keep our churches small as well, like small communities as well?
It's a good question. It's very difficult. Obviously, I've been involved in church leadership before, and so this is the debate that I've had very seriously with people in the past. I want to be fair in saying that one mega is very different to different people. Some people believe that 500 people is too big. Some people believe 10,000 is too big, and then there's some churches that have 40,000 people. So mega is is about perspective, and I think it's very important to say that. I think it's fair to say something like that. It's also important to realize that with larger churches, they're often a composition of smaller communities. So if you have a church with 1,000 people, chances are there's lots of groups of 200, 130, 40. They all meet and do Bible study and so it's possible to have a shared life. I do think, though, there are some things you sacrifice the bigger a church gets. It just becomes harder to meet people and build relationship, because every Sunday you have a chat with someone different. It's hard to follow a train of conversation over like 3 months because there's so many new people all the time. And with a big church like that, people always come in and out. So it's very hard to have a shared life with so many people. It is up to church leaders to wrestle with that question, I think, because there are some things that you can do at a 1,000 people church that you can't do at a 150 people church, but vice versa. There's things you can do at 150 you can't do. I think it's really up to the leader to be discerning and prayerful and to seek good counsel and trying to work out what's the correct size for that community. I do believe in community churches. That's one of the big things I advocated in the past churches I was part of, is to what degree do we serve our community? Before we talk about global ministry and taking over the world, why don't we just serve very faithfully our immediate community? So I miss community churches. I miss churches where, you're like, where do you live? And I'm around the corner. And it's like, oh God, you didn't drive 1 hour to get here from driving through like 10 communities before you got to my one. But you're actually where you live and you're helping that local community. I do believe in that kind of Eden-like way of living where a church and a community of believers naturally nourish the environment that's around them. And so just like in Eden, you had a river flowing out of Eden, you have like a similar river flowing out of a church where all the areas around the church were being blessed by virtue of the gathering of the saints, right? I miss that. And I do think we need more and more of that. I also think we need more small churches, if I'm honest. I think again, just because of the way tech companies grow, there's a kind of grow by any means necessariness that I see in some churches, which is saddening. We need more small churches, I think.
I think that's amazing. Thank you so much for that. And thank you guys for tuning in and watching or listening or however you've taken in to this episode of the Pulse Podcast. Please continue to like, share, subscribe, all of that. And we hope to see you again next time on the Pulse Podcast. Thank you so much.